Okay, in this video we're going to be looking at the GCSE English Literature Paper 2, which is the Modern Text and Poetry. So we are going to be looking at section C, which is the Unseen Poetry section. So let's go straight over to that. Okay, so it's question 27, so you have two parts to the Unseen Poetry. You have a 24 mark and an 8 mark question. So we're first going to look at the 24 marks. So in this exam, you are going to be spending a fair amount of time between the three sections. If you want to learn about how to organise your time, check out my other video to do with English literature and how you divide your time in the exam. But this first question in the Unseen Poetry is going to need more time than the next, which is the 8 mark, but I'm going to talk about that in a different video. So let's talk about how you do a 24 mark question. So first of all, read the question. So I actually like to read the question before I read the actual poem. So let's read that straight away. So it says, On Aging, that's the name of the poem, how does the poet present the speaker's attitudes to growing old? So when you're looking at this, you are going to highlight or underline key words and phrases in the text. So let's look at the key words and phrases. So first, on aging, how does the poet present the speaker's attitude to growing old? So first keyword, on aging. That is the poem that you are going to be looking at. Then we've got, how does the poet, let's think. So present, what does present mean? We've got present, show, image of, ideas that they give you. So when you're brainstorming, just brainstorm all the words and synonyms that come to mind. Then we've got speaker's attitudes. So the speaker, in a poem, poetry is a spoken form of art. So like a song, you sing a song, you don't just read it in your head. Poetry is meant to be performed out loud. So in this case, in a poem, you say the speakers. So what's their attitudes? What does attitude mean? What do they think? What are their views on something? Are they in favour of? Not in favour of? Are they happy, sad? How do they approach something? And then we've got the subject, which is to growing old. So growing old, what does that mean? That means to get older, to become maybe wrinkly, to become, maybe you'll become weaker. Because when we think about growing old, we think about gaining more years. So we can also think about, what's your expectation of when you get older? If you are 15, 16 now, what do you think you're going to be like when you are in your 20s or your 30s or your 50s? Or what about when you're in your 80s? So maybe growing old, as well as, being wrinkly, maybe being slower, maybe but you'll also be wiser. So we think about all the things that it could lead to, and then we'll look at it in the poem. But also, when we're looking at how, so that may not be a word you think would need to be highlighted as a key word, but actually how is very important, because when you look at the poem, you're going to need to give evidence. You'll need to show things to do with the structure of the poem, the form of the poem, the punctuation. You need to look at the language that's used. Maybe they're using a specific type of diction, so a specific group of words to do with a theme. For example, maybe they've got metaphors, similes. So it's how does the writer, the poet, in this case Maya Angelou, show you what the speaker of the poem thinks about getting old? How do they approach it? And in this, you need to be looking at those technical features of writing and then talk about what this shows about growing old, and specifically the speaker's attitudes. So that's analysing the question. If you don't analyse the question, you won't know what it's asking you and you won't know how to answer it. And you need to be able to answer the question in your written answer so that you actually get the marks. Because if you don't answer the question, they won't give the marks, no matter how well you've written it. So when it's a 24 mark question, you're also going to be writing a developed answer. And this means you are going to be writing at least 3 paragraphs, but I'd highly recommend you're writing more like 6 paragraphs in this. You may or may not want to write an introduction and a conclusion. So depending on what your school tells you, some schools say don't write an introduction, some schools say do write an introduction, same with a conclusion. So go with what your school tells you, but if you are like me and you like to set out your argument and draw it to a conclusion, if you want to write an essay properly, you write an introduction and a conclusion. But because you don't have a huge amount of time, I mean, you'll write this in like 24 minutes, because usually I say a mark a minute. You don't have a lot of time, so your introduction and your conclusion will only be at most about 3 sentences. Okay, so next point, let's talk about analysing unseen poetry, because obviously this can be quite daunting. You've never seen it before, you haven't got time, you don't know any of the context, you don't know anything. So let's go through what you need to notice. Okay, so when you analyse a poem that you've never seen before, the first thing to do is actually to read it, and read it a couple times. So let's start with reading it first. So, on ageing. When you see me sitting quietly, like a sack left on the shelf, don't think I need your chattering. I'm listening to myself. Hold. Stop. Don't pity me. Hold. Stop your sympathy. Understanding if you got it, otherwise I'll do without it. When my bones are stiff and aching and my feet won't climb the stair, I will only ask one favour. Don't bring me no rocking chair. When you see me walking, stumbling, don't study and get it wrong. 'Cause tired don't mean lazy and every goodbye ain't gone. I'm the same person I was back then. A little less hair, a little less chin, a lot less lungs and much less wind. But ain't I lucky I can still breathe in. Okay, so that's reading it once. I would recommend read it twice in the exam. But let's start looking at what to look at. So, look for the obvious first. I can't stress this enough. Many of my students miss the obvious and they miss really simple marks, really easy marks to get. So, what do we do? Let's count the number of lines. So here at the side actually, they've written the lines for you, which is very helpful because it means in your answer you can refer to lines 10 or 7 or whatever. They've done it in 5. So we have 20 lines here. Do we have any rhyme? Not really. But I want you to notice if we don't have any rhyme, that's fine. Let's look at punctuation. So when you see me, so we've got comma, comma, full stop, full stop. Then we've got exclamation marks. So on your page, notice this, highlight it. We've got a colon. We've got even some words that have been shortened. That's worth noting. Okay, we've got no stanzas, meaning you don't have little verses that in a song, so you don't have a group of lines in one section. It is all in one stanza. So we have one stanza, 20 lines, and we've got a collection of punctuation. One of the things that I like to do is actually count the number of sentences. So sentences are when you have a full stop. And you can have a sentence that runs over a number of lines. So if you look at the first 4 lines here, that makes up one sentence. And you think, well, what does that mean? So actually, one of the things that's interesting is to summarize one sentence. So here, when you see me sitting quietly like a sack left on the shelf, don't think I need your chattering. And I was even wrong, that's 2 sentences. So the first 3 lines. So remember to look carefully, you can miss punctuation, and because the capital letter is at the beginning of the line, sometimes you can miss it like I did. So when you see me sitting quietly like a sack left on the shelf, don't think I need your chattering. So you can think even, who is the speaker addressing in this poem? Because it's obviously someone they're addressing. That's one sentence. I'm listening to myself. Hold. Stop. Don't pity me. Hold. Stop your sympathy. I mean, it's a very strong tone. So that's another thing you can notice. Tone. And when they say tone, that means tone of voice. How do they sound? Do they sound soft? Do they sound hard? Do they sound interested? Do they sound encouraging, confident? angry, sad, because a tone of voice will convey a lot. And in English, I mean, if you are imagining it when you're at home and your mum says, "Can you go sit on the chair?" That's very nice. Or, "Sit on the chair." Tone of voice is very nice. Very different to "sit on the chair." Very different. And you know immediately which is a request and which is a command. So it's the same. And here you have punctuation. Hold, stop, don't pity me. Again, they've put the verb in the what we call the infinitive, the imperative, which is the command word. So rather than saying I look, he, she, holds, etc., you take away the pronoun and you just have the verb, the imperative form. That's the command form of a word. And here, hold, stop, don't, and she's repeated again on lines 5 and 6, those are commands. So what I'm going to do here is actually highlight when I've got changes in punctuation, because I think this is important to notice. So when you're on your exam paper, just go through and highlight all these different punctuation marks, because then you can start noticing how they change throughout the text. So I'm going to speed this up now and you can watch me. Now, when you're analysing poetry, you can go through the whole poem line by line. That's fine. But if you want to skip around, that's also okay, because you're going to see connections between the whole text. Because one of the interesting things about poetry is that it has synthesized a huge amount of meaning into a very short space of time. Poets who write well are incredible. I really respect their ability to synthesize information so clearly. So let's continue looking at this poem. So this first 3 lines where we said that what's she talking about, what I'd recommend is actually summarizing. So what is she saying? So when you see me sitting quietly like a sack left on the shelf, don't think I need your chattering. So if you don't know what she's saying straight away, look at what you do know. So look at line 2 here. And actually I'm going to add in some line numbers before. Okay, here on line 2 we have a simile. Now the simile is split between 2 lines of the 2 lines. When you see me sitting quietly like a sack left on the shelf. So if you're having trouble getting meaning, look beyond the line, read through the line, because it will carry on. There's a reason why the poet separated them, but maybe you don't know straight away. So like a sack left on the shelf. So she's describing herself. When you see me sitting quietly like a sack left on the shelf. So think of the imagery of a sack. What does a sack look like? What connotations does it have? So connotations mean what is suggested by it. What are the other images? So it's empty, and you can put question marks because your questions will lead you to the analysis. So it's empty, left over, forgotten, maybe. And the speaker is maybe likening themselves to the sack. When you see me sitting quietly. So be silent, because sacks can't talk, remember. Like a sack left on the shelf. So she's saying, I'm old, because we're probably talking about someone who's old, or the speaker's someone who's old. I'm left there, I'm forgotten. But we've got this tone already of someone quite full of life almost, and very determined, as we've noticed from lines 5 and 6. And also line 3, don't think I need your chattering. That's also a command. It's saying, hey, I don't need you. I don't want you, almost. If I'm sitting there quietly, you don't need to witter on, because chattering, that's talking, but talking about nothing. So here you've got chattering has negative connotations of talking but saying nothing. And the speaker doesn't need it. Because, as we learn on line 5, she's listening to herself. Let's put speaker to be specific. And then we've got hold, stop, don't pity me, stop, your sympathy. So here we've also got these commands. We can talk about, well, what is the language saying? It's saying, don't feel sorry for me. So here within this, we're getting this feeling of independence, this tone of independence. But it's interesting because she's had the simile in the first and second line saying, well, when you see me sitting like a sack on the shelf, so a sack on the shelf, empty, left over, forgotten, silent, it doesn't give you the idea of independence. But the tone that's coming across is very independent, strong, almost stubborn. And then in line 7 she says, stop understanding if you got it, otherwise I'll do without it. So she doesn't want pity, she doesn't want sympathy, but she wants understanding. So what does understanding mean? Does that mean someone who, what do you think? What do you think if you're looking at someone who's like a sack left on a shelf, who's weak and maybe empty, forgotten, silent? But you don't want pity, because pity is like when you feel sorry for someone, you're like, oh, shame for them. Oh. Understanding, on the other hand, is different. It's saying, okay, I see what you've done, I see where you are, but I'm not going to feel sorry for you, I'm just going to talk to you. So maybe it's like benefit of the doubt. Maybe not exactly that. But coming on equal terms, perhaps. Because the speaker is adamant, otherwise I'll do without it. And there's that adamant tone, strong, stubborn. And then we're learning more about who the speaker is. So when my bones are stiff and aching and my feet won't climb the stair, I will only ask one favour, don't bring me no rocking chair. So here in this sentence, because look, we've got a sentence here and we've got colons, commas. So this is one sentence. Let's notice the simple things, remember. And we've got a description of the speaker by the speaker, along with lines 1 to 2, where she makes a simile about herself and she looks like a sack. So here are the typical things you would associate with someone who's old. So stiff bones are stiff and aching, they have trouble climbing the stairs, so maybe they need a rocking chair. So this is the type of age. So let's see, description: old, stiff, aching bones, which means you get the idea that they're probably wrinkly, maybe when they've got, my feet won't climb the stair, they move slowly. But they say, I will only ask one favour, don't bring me no rocking chair. So in a way, you could say that the speaker is saying, don't treat me old. They don't want to be treated differently. So here's where the idea of understanding is. Like, I want your understanding to maybe wait for me because I'm slow, or give me a little help, perhaps. But don't bring me a rocking chair. Don't treat me like I've got nothing left. So just before we move on to line 13, I want to draw your attention to lines 5 and 6 again. I don't believe there's any other lines. Yeah, lines 5 and 6 especially. So if you notice the exclamation marks here, so one of the technical vocabulary we can use to describe poetry is something called a caesura. You might have heard it in school, but a caesura is when we have a pause, a breath pause in the middle of the line of poetry. So in this, we have very, very clear caesuras with the punctuation, which is an exclamation mark. So we've got 1, 2, and 3 across 2 lines. That's quite a lot. Now you can think about the way we would say this phrase if there wasn't punctuation. We'd say, hold, stop, don't pity me. Hold, stop, your pity. Hold, stop your sympathy. So here, it doesn't have the same effect as when you say, hold, stop, don't pity me. Hold, stop your sympathy, sorry. So the tone, the independence, the stubbornness, the strength comes with the use of exclamation marks. And we have caesura. It's not how you spell it. Caesuras. In the middle of the line. So these are the exclamation marks in the middle of the line that give you punctuation. So in your answer, you can talk about how this affects the attitude the speaker has towards aging, because, well, it doesn't affect, it actually shows the speaker's attitude, because it's the language and the punctuation is saying, do not feel sorry for me. And this is a command. It's not a request, it is a command. So let's go on to line 13. Okay, when you see me walking, stumbling, don't study and get it wrong. So again, here we have another command. So the speaker is saying, well, when I'm, walking like an old person because my bones are achy and stiff. Because if you see an old person, maybe they've got a walking stick and they just don't move fluidly. Don't stare at me, is basically what they're saying. Don't judge me. And this is going to be further supported in the next 2 lines, lines 15 and 16, because it says, because tired don't mean lazy and every goodbye ain't gone. I mean, that's quite a strong statement, because it says, hey, they don't want to be slow. They're tired, but they're not lazy. They still have life going on. And every goodbye ain't gone. They've still got life left in them. And then they go on to describe themselves again. So here we have a sentence. Oh, and I've added extra punctuation without meaning to. Okay, I'm the same person I was back then. A little less hair, a little less chin, a lot less lungs, and much less wind. So again, they're saying it doesn't, just because I'm moving slow, just because I don't have as much hair as I did, just because maybe I've got some extra fat on my chin, maybe I don't have as much energy as I used to, I am still the same in my mind. So their ability to move and their energy is less, but they're still the same in their mind. And I think that's important. So you can even, when you're going through, highlight the words, circle the words that give you this idea. Obviously, I'm doing this on a computer, so I'm a little bit more restricted in how I can do things. Okay, the last line, but ain't I lucky I can still breathe in. So this is like a celebration of being alive. They're old, but they can still breathe, because when you die, you don't breathe anymore. And here, you can use these quotes. I mean, it's something simple, but it's showing very clearly the speaker's attitude towards aging. They're saying, I don't want pity. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I want to keep moving. I might look like I'm slow. I might look like I can't do things. I may have stiff bones. I might move slowly. But don't you dare feel sorry for me, because aren't I lucky that I am still alive? I'm still the same person as I was. I'm still the same in my mind. And I'm here. Don't feel sorry for me. I think it's an incredibly strong poem. And I think also, in a way, quite pertinent quite now with all the coronavirus stuff that's going on and all the old people who don't want to be left alone. Yes, they're old, but they still have life. I know my grandparents, my grandmas, probably feel like this. And here you've got Maya Angelou, who's put it into 20 lines. That's it. Not many words. And in such a strong way. So here, when you're looking through the poem, start with the really simple stuff. So you can talk about the fact that the poem is in one stanza. There are 20 lines. There is punctuation to emphasize the strength of the tone. You've got the language is, well, it's everyday language. One of the things I haven't actually talked about here is the type of language. So, because tired don't mean lazy, and don't bring me no rocking chair here. So here we've got what we could say like not dialect. That's not the right word, but it's colloquial, meaning that it's everyday language. It's showing where the speaker's from. Maybe not as clear enough for us to know exactly, but it is language that if we were writing an academic essay, for example, the way you are going to write this essay for your exam, you would not write it in this way. You would not say ain't. You would not put don't bring me no rocking chair. You would say don't bring me a rocking chair. You wouldn't shorten because to mean to cause. You wouldn't say ain't. You would say but aren't I lucky. So here we've got a very colloquial language. And perhaps it shows the socioeconomic group that the speaker is from. Maybe that's deliberate on Maya Angelou's part. It probably is, because poets always have a very specific reason for saying things. Because a poem is so short, and this is only 20 lines. So let us now go on to how do we plan an answer now that we have analysed it.